And we're going to begin this show with a discussion among ourselves. And I'm asking each of our guests, and I will do this too, is to tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself, about your creative life. And I'd like to start with Alex Colvin. And I know that he is a musician, a poet, a songwriter, a philosopher. You have a website and a blog, and some people call you the flawed guru. So what are you going to tell us, Alex?
Well, just in the issue of creative life and about myself, it started when I was a child. And so at that early age, I don't know what really the influences were, other than that I liked music and I liked nursery rhymes, you know, because one of the things I've always found was that one of the things that, like, reading poetry gives birth to writing poetry.
Yes.
And so as a child, you know, my mom showed me one time, I think it's lost now, but a poem that I wrote when I was a kid, and I went, wow, that's really beautiful. These things would just come. I lived in San Francisco from the age of 5 or 6 to 9, and would drive up here where my grandfather had a ranch up in Bernie, and my brother and my mom would be in the front seat and I would be in the back seat, and I would just be singing songs as we drove along, just making them up. So it was always a thing.
So you would make up songs?
I would make up songs and just be singing songs as we drove along, and go, where are you getting all this stuff? You know.
So you didn't have a little computer, a little cell phone that you were busily, you know, that's great, that's great.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's wonderful. So your creativity as a child just blossomed.
Right.
From the back seat of the car.
And I might start with something like, you know, someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, but then it would just go off, making up my own lyrics and everything. So there were periods, and then I found, like, you know, that it was in high school when we studied poetry, I wrote a lot of poetry, some of which I still remember because the written work was lost. And then whenever I got in, and then from listening to music, you know, when I first got a guitar, first thing I did when I got a guitar, somebody showed me 3 songs, so I made up a song called Superman, Batman, and Flash Gordon. And that's kind of been it. And I think all of the arts are related. So for a while I did painting too. And I also like writing, you know, I haven't done a lot of it, but where you look at a painting and then you put it into a poem, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And and then I've always been philosophically minded. Finding the truth has always been a key element for me, and I've always, especially from early post-puberty, been influenced by love.
I love.
Right.
I love. You know, so that is so interesting, that, because in fact, I formally met you a week ago, but as I remember way back 10 years ago or so, when we were open mics around town, after we talked for a bit, I remember that you were participating in those too. So it's really fascinating. And so when I was talking with you last week, and you mentioned philosophy and contemplation, and so that has been with you all your life as well. Is that what you're saying? To seek out the truth, to seek out meanings, mysteries.
That's always been a thing, and I have not always, and still am not, very practically minded.
Oh.
You know, it's always been about, you know, figuring things out, knowing things, not necessarily knowing practical things like how wires and technology work, but trying to understand reality and the human mind.
Are you a Pisces?
No, I'm a Virgo. Polar axis.
That has no.
One of my best friends is a Pisces. You know, if it's a harmonious relationship, boy, that's something. You know, because the water flows into the earth. The earth can help contain the water, but the water nourishes the earth.
That's true. And I would like to, I'm going to ask Craig some questions here too, and I'm going to ask you more questions as we go along. So Craig, what about you? What could you tell us about your life? I mean, I know you're a musician. You know a lot about music. You travel all over listening to music and meeting musicians and playing music, and you host a show called Dig This Music with a Message. And you also worked with gerontology, or the elderly, and some people who were, terminally ill. So what can you tell us about you and your life and your
Well, yeah, I've always enjoyed music, art, and literature, and it just makes life worthwhile. I worked in Child and Family Services for a time, but I found that I liked working with senior citizens and their life experiences, and they would tell me their stories, and their stories were amazing, and I was inspired by all of that. So I've written songs and play music and go to a lot of concerts, and it means a lot to me. Music is such a big part of my life. So from the beginning of the day to when I go to bed at night, my wife can say that I will be singing. And it's just before going to bed even, I sing a little song. It's not the same song. Depends on the circumstances.
Oh, that is so interesting. I mean, both you and Alex, I mean, I'm picturing Alex in the back seat of his car, as a child, and I mean, music has been with him all his life, and you're saying, similar kinds of things, that music fills your day, fills your soul, and you sing before bed.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So, yeah, I have some poems and little things here to share about dealing with those who have forgotten.
Do you want to read one now and then read more later, or what would you like to do?
Well, I've got a little sequence here.
Well,
if you're not ready, then.
I am ready, but
That's
I'm
right.
not ready,
Okay,
because
all right.
I thought I would just talk a little bit more about our lives.
Gotcha.
But it's interesting because we can intersperse poetry with that too, and I understand sequences. What astrological sign are you? I'm curious.
Pisces.
Pisces!
Isn't that funny? That is like funny.
In
Yeah.
fact, I was born on the Ides of March.
Oh.
March 15th.
Oh, and well, my
Hey, too, Brutus.
my partner's birthday is on the 14th. So
Oh, wow.
Another Pisces,
Wow.
all these creative, visionary people. And I will tell the audience just a little bit about
Yes.
me, that I'm a poet and a performance artist. And obviously I host this show, Late Night Poetry Jam, but I also host Dig This Environmental Watch. And I'm an environmental and social justice activist, and that comes out of my poetry as well. And I was thinking last night about what else I had been doing musically, because I knew that I was going to be with people who music is very important to. And I used to play the trumpet, but they called me Trumpet Lips in high school. I was first chair trumpet.
All right.
I was really good.
Wow.
But then vanity or whatever, I stopped playing trumpet, and I have a set of drums, and congas and a tuba, and a quinto. And I took lessons for a while. And I love animals, so all of those things are a little bit about me.